So this video's a bit wacky, it's a bit mental, but I used to feel really low at a specific time in my life, maybe around about 21 or 22, 23. And it was around about the time where I was signing on. It was the dark nights, I had no money, I had no job, and I was always reminiscent of the past. Whenever I get home from the job centre, I mean, for all I knew, I could have been meeting people that night to have a drink with them, but here's me, starting early basically, so starting about 9 hours early, going home, cracking up my bottle, and watching old game reviews that would remind me of specific times, whether it's Tony Hawk's Underground 2, Crash Bandicoot games. Again, I would just do these things to give myself that nostalgic feeling. Sounds extremely sad, I understand that. So basically one day I decided I'm going to give myself a couple of options here. If I could go back in time, would it really make me feel that much better? Now again, this is fucking mental. If I could go back in time, would it really make me feel better? So I gave myself two options. Option number one, I go back in time and I've still got the same brain or same consciousness that I've got now. Therefore I can enjoy it and appreciate the fact that I'm back in time. Option number two would be that I go back in time and I'm unaware of it, therefore I can't appreciate the fact that I'm back in time to enjoy it. And what would then happen is I would ultimately find myself back in the present, which is where I wanted to go back in time in the first place. So that wouldn't work. So of course I went with option number one, which is I go back in time and I'm aware of it. But within that option, there's two scenarios. Scenario number one, if I go back in time, does that mean that the people that I'm seeing back then, they're also aware that they're back in time? Or scenario number two, I go back in time and they're unaware of it. So for the next part of the video, I'll be putting myself in scenario number one. So I'm back in time and they're also back in time. This wouldn't really work because for a start, some of these people don't get on with each other anymore. They move on, certain things happen in life in order to change life situations. It would be a case of somebody sitting there going, what's he doing here, or what's she doing here, or they wouldn't want to talk to each other, they would fall out, and ultimately the memory that you're trying to go back to isn't going to exist, at least not the same way. But let's just say you do get on with each other, and it's a case of it's like a reunion, where you're all chatting, what you've been up to these days, etc. Some of you might not be interested, or I might not be interested in doing the things that I used to do back then. We used to go down hills and trolleys, filling myself, kidding on at my party jackass, playing hidey, climbing trees, football, that kind of stuff. You might not be in the mood to go back and do that again. So let's just say you all think, we'll get a drink. And again, depending on the time period that you're thinking back to, it might be hard. A wee 10-year-old guy sitting asking somebody to go in and get them drink. But I ain't bother, mate. So then, let's say you've got your drink, you're all getting a catch up. Depending on, again, what time you go back to, you might be drinking in a field or a park to avoid getting caught, or an empty or somebody's house party. You're still no back in that memory that you're trying to get back to that's causing you sadness in the present. You're essentially back in that memory with the actual memory still fresh in your head, and it's no playing out that way. You would have to go home at a certain time, get your dinner, go to bed early for school. What if it's the weekend? Again, this doesn't really matter. You would still have to relive all the things that you've done, having to go through school, playing all the old games, watching all the old films, knowing that there's much better ones out where you're fae. Or you could essentially put bizarre football bets on where you're betting for a specific player to get injured at an exact time, a substitute to come on at an exact time, the score to be this. You could predict lottery numbers, or no predict them, you know what the numbers are going to be that day. So then now you're a millionaire, or you're rich in some way, but then that would change the timeline because you might move on and stay in a different location, meet different people that ultimately affect you getting back to the point that you were in the first place, where you were wanting to go back. But Scott, what if you could jump back and forth at will? You could just jump back to the present. Again, that would be fine, but that wasn't what I was feeling at that time. I was doing it because I missed the memories at times. It wasn't a case of going back and getting more money or changing things that I've screwed up on in the past, which ultimately made me the person that I am today anyway. So then let's just say I go back to when, scenario number two, I go back and I'm aware but nobody else is aware. How weird is that? Because you're essentially just sitting there with your up-to-date conscious brain, hanging about with wee guys and wee lasses. You're just sitting with wee boys and wee lasses. You're not exactly going to relate to them in any way. It's going to be a bit weird and lonely at the same time. Also, some of the people that were involved around the circle that I was in at that time, I wasn't really that pal with, whereas some of the people are now my best pals that I've got a lot of good memories with. But if I was back then and they're unaware of it, I couldn't convince them that I'm for the future. You'd get institutionalised in the past, like that series Dark that's on Netflix. You go back in time and now you're institutionalised, and therefore you never make it back to the moment that you're in where you want to go back in time. I mean, if there's such a thing as reality shifting, that's got to be one way of doing it. And again, if you can jump back and forth in time, if it's something that you can just jump back to, then you'd just be sitting there you'd have nothing in common, or you could be thinking, I've been there, I've done all that, I'm not interested in these things anymore that these people are talking about. What am I really getting for this? And then all of a sudden you hear your ma or your dad shouting you in for dinner and you think, fuck this. So you jump back to the present. You wake back up in the present and think, that was a complete waste of time. So again, this was back before I knew about meditation, the ego, any kind of practice that involved living in the moment. But even then, I still kind of learnt something for that, getting myself out of it by questioning it a wee bit, even though it's completely insane. And what I basically got for that is, if you're constantly stuck, you're dwelling on the past all the time, you're constantly reminiscing of the past, then you're going to keep doing that. It's going to get to the point where a couple of years from now, you're going to be thinking back to this moment, thinking, oh, I wish I was back there. Now, I understand that's a bit of a bizarre thing to say these days, considering COVID and lockdown and you can't go anywhere or that kind of stuff, but you know what I mean. Enjoy this present moment that you're in. I'm not saying you're not already, I'm technically talking to myself here, but I keep saying you as well. Another weird one that I want to add in, this requires mentally travelling to the future, mentally time travelling to the future. I used to do this thing where, again, this was before I knew about things like the art of practicing dying and stuff like that. I didn't know any of these things existed. But I would lie down, whenever I was feeling upset in life, I would lie down and I would shut my eyes, I would strongly visualise myself as an old man in the future who has lost his girlfriend, his pals, his family. He's getting towards death himself. And as this old man, I've got the memory of my younger self when life was so full of excitement. I was experimenting with new things. I didn't know where life was going to take me, my partner, my friends. It was exciting, but then here I am as this old man. I've lost everybody around about me and I'm approaching death's door myself. And I would really strongly visualise this to the point I was really starting to get upset early it. But then, in this mental image of myself in the future as this old man, I would imagine that I've got a second chance to come back, and then I would open my eyes, and as my eyes open, I feel as if I've technically time travelled back to where I'm currently at, or where I currently was at, and I've got all these things still, and I can try to appreciate it a bit more. The same way you have a horrible nightmare, it's one of the really vivid dreams, and you wake up for it, you understand that it was just a dream. Therefore, for the next 24 hours, you appreciate life, then you go back to normal, you go back to your default mode, as we always do, we get used to things. So I suppose the point of the video was just to try and appreciate things. I'm technically talking about myself here, I was trying to tell myself these things, just try to appreciate what you've got right now. So I hope you take away something for this video, take away for it what you will. It's like listening to a song. Sometimes a song's lyrics can resonate with you different for the person sitting beside you listening to the same lyrics. So treat this video the same kind of way. So if you liked the video, then subscribe if you want to see where the channel's gone. Share it with somebody you think it might help. Leave a thumbs up and let me know down the bottom in the comments anything you want really. I like to hear about all this kind of stuff. And thanks very much for watching. Take care.